You have likely seen this plant before, Crassula ovata, but you probably know it more by its common name, which is jade or money tree. This is a great succulent for beginners. It grows really easily. It can actually handle growing indoors in some lower light, and it is so easy to propagate. It doesn't need very much water to survive, and it looks awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about how to care for this plant. First off, you'll want to know that it can tolerate temperatures down to about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's considered a zone 9 plant here in the US. If you do know that you're going to have temperatures at 20 degrees or below for an extended period of time, make sure you cover this with frost cloth or bring it inside. It can handle several nights in a row of frost, but once you get down to 20 degrees, that's the bare minimum it can tolerate. So you'll start to see some frost damage if you leave it out for too long or don't have it covered by frost cloth. You'll want to place it in an area that gets full sun to partial shade. So full sun for this plant means about 8 hours a day, but avoid giving it full sun in late afternoon when the temperatures are really hot, as it does not love the heat. But when it is getting a lot of sunlight and just the perfect amount of sun, you'll see right along the edges, it gets this nice red tint. And that shows that it's getting plenty of sunlight, but is still healthy. If you're growing this plant indoors, you'll likely want to use a grow light to help keep the growth nice and compact. But you don't have to, as long as it's by a bright window and you keep your watering to a minimum so it's not growing as quickly, it will still do quite well indoors. But you will notice that the red tinge along the edge will likely go away, and it'll probably turn a little bit of a deeper green as well. I would say this has fairly typical watering needs for a succulent, so you want to use the soak and dry method as always. And if you're not sure what that is, be sure to watch our video on watering. And you soak the soil and you let it dry out completely before you water it again. So when you're growing it indoors, that might mean you're watering once every week and a half to 2 weeks, depending on the size of your pot and the plant, but it can go fairly long periods of time without water. However, you can also water it a little bit more frequently to increase the growth. I don't recommend doing this as much indoors, as you'll start to notice more stretching or elongation from it. But if you want it to grow quickly, water it a little bit more often. Just keep your eyes out for yellow mushy leaves or any signs of blackening, which would mean that it's getting too much water. Now, this plant can grow to be about 3 to 4 feet in height and about 2 to 3 feet in width. So outdoors, it can grow into be a pretty sizable bush. But it also works really well in container gardens, and I love combining it with other succulents to kind of fill in the gaps, as it's really like soft, pliable shape, just contrasts nicely to a lot of these rosette succulents. It just has a little bit different look, and they work really well together. So we've talked about how it's not cold hardy, but it's actually considered to be a winter grower. But what that means is you'll see most of the growth during mild climates or mild times of year. So when the temperatures are around 70, that is the happy season for jade. It will grow the most in those kind of mild times of year, and it will keep growing as it gets cooler. But in the summer, when the temperatures get really hot, you're not going to see as much growth. So it's really important that during this summer dormancy that you slow down on watering, because too much water while it's hot and while it's dormant will actually cause it to rot a lot quicker. What might be a good watering schedule for the winter could be way too much for the summer and can cause your succulent to rot within just 2 to 3 days. So be really careful with how much water you're giving it in the summer when it's growing outdoors. This plant is not, it is generally considered toxic to humans and animals. So be careful if you have if you have animals around the plants, just make sure that they're not trying to take a bite or keep it out of reach. And it's not one that I would recommend you consume either. But this great little plant with these nice oval leaves and compact growth when it gets plenty of light, it is such a great succulent for beginners. So if you want something to try out and you're not really sure if you're the lots of water type or the I hardly ever want to water type, this is a good succulent for you to play with and figure out. It's very forgiving and does really well both indoors and outdoors. Now, I would love to know if you have this succulent in your collection. Leave a comment below and let me know your experience with Crassula ovata or Jade, and also if it's on your wish list. If you haven't already, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and share it with all of your succulent living friends or anyone you know who owns a jade plant currently. And I will see you next time.